Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Fallout Season 2 Episode 1. It's called The Innovator. So spoilers for the episode as always. It's been a little while since Season 1. I feel like I say that for every TV show now though, because everything's taking 2 to 3 years between seasons, but Season 1 was a fun show, right? Not necessarily the best show ever, but it was consistently entertaining. The weird offbeat comedy and kind of like fun pulpy violence, did a lot to keep it entertaining. But it kind of left me in an interesting place where it's not like I was like frothing at the mouth anticipating Season 2. It wasn't like I was so excited for the next part of the story. In the same way that, like a Severance Season 2 or something like that would make me feel. So, I went into this with somewhat kind of like, game for it, and I saw the reviews, the Rotten Tomato score for Season 2 is very high, so that was a nice indicator. Obviously, one of the big things that was good about Season 1 was its kind of authenticity to feeling like it was in the same world as the games, the set designs, the locations looking very right out the games, the costumes, all that kind of thing, all look very good. And that's still all true, based on this first episode. I still feel like I was seeing a lot of things that seem vaguely familiar from what I've played of mainly 3, bit of 4, a little bit of New Vegas, which obviously this season's getting into a little bit of, because we're going to Vegas, which was set up at the end of last season. Having said that, though, I do think this episode's just okay. It's a little bit of a lukewarm start, I think, to the season. It feels a bit on the slow side. Pacing feels a little bit lackluster, and I think part of that is because we're jumping around characters and we're mostly just kind of continuing things that were left off last season. It doesn't really feel like a lot has there's no big injection of like a fresh new direction for the most part. There is one new thing that's introduced and one character that I think we're going to be learning a lot more about as the season goes on, that being Robert House, played by Justin Theroux, who's kind of like the super rich guy who has built all the robots and stuff, and he's built like a mind control device. The episode starts off with like a flashback to him basically going after some sort of working class people who have been laid off or on strike because the robots are taking their jobs, and him kind of antagonizing them, teasing them with a bunch of money, but then testing out his little mind control device to make one of the guys kill or at least beat up the other two. And then his head explodes. And yeah, the fun over-the-top gore is part of the appeal of the show. And I think in some ways this was my favourite scene of the episode, because I think conceptually it was introducing something new. I like Justin Theroux. I think there's an interesting vibe here. He's dressed like a rich preppy guy from the 1950s, and he's, super kind of evil and all that. But with a smile on his face, of course, because that's very much the type of villains we get on this show. Having said that, there was maybe one or two moments where I thought like the guy's friends were just kind of waiting for him to do the mind control thing, as opposed to like asking questions about why this guy's like putting this thing in the back of his neck. It felt a little bit stilted from like a moment to moment pacing kind of way, but conceptually I was kind of into everything that was happening in the scene. But once we get into the main sort of flow of the episode, which is basically bouncing between Lucy and the ghoul, or Cooper, whatever we want to call him. I forget what I was calling him last season. And also remembering everyone's names is always going to be a challenge when I come back to a show like this. But we're bouncing between their journey following her dad, right, who's on the way to Vegas. At least that's what it seemed like based on the ending of last season. And just the various people they encounter along the way and different things they encounter along the way. But it's very kind of, just kind of, I don't know, it's very simple, right? It's very simple, just following the bread trails. And I wouldn't say that too much of it's that interesting. I think mostly the first big scene with them is supposed to show their dynamic working together, which is that she keeps trying to not kill people and shoot them in, like, the leg or the ass, as he puts it at one point. Whereas once he's kind of let loose, he just kills everyone because he doesn't see the point in not bothering. Because they've got like a plan up front where it looks like she's handed him over to a bunch of what's the word I'm looking for? Raiders, and they're going to hang him, and she's supposed to step in and stop it, but she instead tries to like make a deal with them, and it doesn't work, of course. They just want to kill her, so she ends up just going to what the original plan was, and we get this over the top scene where he's killing people left and right, and some of that stuff is fun, where people explode in the middle of the air because of grenades, or he shoots them with a shotgun and like the entire leg comes flying off. I enjoy that stuff as a horror movie fan, especially. A lot of that was entertaining to watch, but you know, them encountering this woman who's selling the flea soup, like it kind of felt like we were just kind of like going through a very sort of straightforward path with the characters. And the most interesting thing that they sort of encounter is a vault that's kind of went to hell. It looks like terrible. But this mind control device is in there, and the father has left someone alive with this mind control device on, telling her to go home as a message. And then his head explodes. And she's like, no, I'm determined to keep going because my dad's going to keep hurting people. I think that's that core idea, like her having this, and this is something I've talked a lot about in season 1, I'm sure, is her core kind of like moral compass being the heart of the show, and then hopefully over time changing Walton Goggins to maybe having a little bit more of his humanity restored. Obviously, he's very much like against it at first, and he is in this episode. I don't know if anything that they go through in this episode is that interesting, though. I don't know if anything surprising really happens, or it feels like they're met with like a real conflict at any point. You know, something that feels like they have to go through a big thing where they're in danger. It feels like they're just kind of going through the motions, and nothing's ever a threat to them in this episode. You know, I don't really even know what I specifically am looking for per se. Other than just it feels kind of like we're on the straight line. We're on the path that makes sense, but nothing particularly exciting or interesting, I think, happens on that journey as of yet. It feels like we're just kind of settling into where they were left off at the end of last season, but nothing really challenges their pairing, their friendship, if you want to call it that, or their journey as of yet in this episode. Perhaps the most intriguing thing is just this idea that this vault was being used with these mind control devices to turn people into communists, which is kind of weird given how anti-communist everything was with vault tech in in America before the nuclear winter happened in this show. So curious as to that, I guess, but nothing that was particularly screaming at me is like a new development for this plot line. Like, I feel like it was just kind of going through the motions of everything that was already set up before without it doing anything particularly exciting or new. And in a similar vein, I feel the same way about all the flashbacks with Walton Goggins' character, Cooper, the actor. Because the big thing with him at the end of last season was that he heard his wife say that they were going to drop the bombs themselves to ensure that their plan for the post-nuclear like survival and like management system of the planet was all going to go through and all that. In this episode, he immediately wants to run away with his daughter, given what he's heard, and he meets was it Moldaver is the woman? I mean, that's not her name in the past, admittedly, but that's what she is in the post-apocalypse. And she's basically like, hey, this all leads to some guy named Robert House. You're familiar with him? And he's like, yeah, he's the richest guy on the planet. He does all this, blah, 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 blah. And she implies that she wants him to kill him. Like, if you kill him, maybe we can put an end to all this. And we know that's not going to happen because clearly all of the nuclear war did happen. Or war might even be the right word, given that it's just nuclear Armageddon, we'll call it. And he doesn't want that. He goes home, but he hears on the radio more talk about this character House and how he's prepping for the future and building robots and talking about how he's building an armament of nukes inside Vegas and how that'll be whatever. And he puts on a brave smile and says welcome home to his wife at the end of the scene, and that's kind of the end. And there's a lot of time to this subplot of like these flashbacks of him leaving the house with his daughter, being in the street with his daughter when the test siren goes off and his daughter gets scared and everyone's running around. And it looked like a scene right out of like the start of Fallout 4, the video game, actually, the residential street when the alarms are going off. So very similar to that. So again, the design's on point. And then he meets Moldaver, and the ending kind of implies that at the very least he's going to attempt to go to Vegas with his wife when she goes there on a business trip to maybe meet this House character, even if he's not committed to try to kill him yet. And that's all fine, but I don't think, again, that this felt like it really introduced anything particularly new or like challenging for the character. Right? In theory, he's not agreed to go through with becoming kind of the spy slash assassin, even though he's clearly starting to have big, strong beliefs and doubts about what his wife's involved in, and doesn't really want to be a part of like setting up the end of the world just so that one company can profit from it or whatever. That's all fine on paper. That all makes sense, but I don't really think there's that much of a like him hearing them talk about this house guy in the radio a little bit and his like business endeavors and how that might tie into these plans doesn't feel like enough of a motivator for him to completely like go along with like playing nice with the wife so he can maybe go through with the plan. And maybe he's not committed to that yet, like I said. Maybe he's just at least sort of keeping the option open. But I don't know if that's enough of a plot swing from like him like not agreeing to go through with this. It kind of feels like we could have just started his plot in this episode with him talking to the lady, to Moldaver. Like, if we just started there, and probably the same with the post-apocalypse stuff as well, if we had just started with them coming across the vault, like, we could have really just started the plot there, and everything before then was just kind of like more of the same, getting back into the feeling, which isn't necessarily a terrible thing, but it does make this episode feel like not a whole lot really advances or happens. I would say I was kind of feeling a little bit lackluster in terms of actual progression and character kind of growth, I guess, or characters being challenged that would motivate them into the next part of their journey. For the most part, I felt like they were just kind of in the same places that we started in, by and large. And while, yes, he's still kind of spying on his wife, he was already doing that in the finale last season, so it doesn't really feel like that much of a change, all things considered. I feel like something more of like more of an inciting incident, a motivating factor for him to want to at least consider going after this guy, this rich guy that is connected to everything going on via his wife's connections. I think, you know, like it feels a little bit tepid for me, this episode, both in the flashback story and in the main story, which is just following her dad, right? That's all. It's just following Lucy's dad and the trail that he's left behind, and I don't think anything feels that cataclysmic along the way. I do think it does feel quite dark that he has used a human puppet to deliver a message and then kill him. Like, I think that further establishes just how villainous her dad is, but I don't know if it feels like it's, you know, maybe if she was, like, actually starting to doubt, like, going on the journey, maybe she was starting to consider just going home, and then this was, like, what really motivated her, saying, no, he has to be stopped. This isn't just about anything else. This is about stopping someone who I think is evil and doing what's right. Like, maybe that could have had more of an impact. But, you know, when this guy head explodes and Goggins just says, hey, are you going to take that advice and go home? And he's like, no, you won't stop killing people. It just kind of feels like nothing has changed in her. She felt determined before and she still feels determined. So nothing has really impacted from there. I mean, maybe if it looks like she was even considering taking the advice for a second before saying, no, actually, no, I am determined, that might have felt like something. But she was determined to find him. The message was delivered and she's still determined to find him. So it doesn't really feel like anything's like been impacted because of it. It does show how evil he is, how he's willing to just use people and kill people, which makes sense given that his entire company was willing to kill everyone pretty much for this future they all wanted to control. So it fits with the character, but I'm not sure it really does anything interesting in terms of progression. Other plot lines we're kind of following. In the vaults, we have a bit more of, what's her name? Is it Harper? Is the eye patch lady who's the overseer and is kind of scary, and Chet's scared of her, and he's kind of backing down from her even though he's been lumped with taking care of her baby, who she hasn't even named yet and refers to as it, which is interesting. And he's not really happy with the idea of the baby being called Chet Jr., but he goes along with it when she gets scary. There's also the other guy who I think is named Reg, who has started a support group for people who are products of incest. That was just kind of quirky, I guess. I didn't really feel a whole lot for that plot line yet. It felt like it was just kind of a typical quirky Fallout characters, and I didn't really know what the point of it was yet, but I'm sure it's building to something. But as of right now, I wasn't really feeling a whole lot out of his little support group meeting, and the one old woman being there for the snacks. I'm sure it's building to something, but I wasn't really feeling much of it. It kind of felt like we were going through the motions for a lot of this episode, is I guess what I'm really saying, because I felt that about almost every plot line to some extent. Some obviously have more interesting characters than others, but that was kind of that. We also, of course, have Norm, who's been trapped in Vault 31 with all the people in the cryosleep, and the brain character Bud keeping him there, who basically tries to convince him to go in the pod or die over the course of the storyline. I think it's saying a lot that there's a few scenes with them before we get to that decision where Norm fights back, kicks the syringe away, and the plot ends with him saying that he's opening all the pods up, which it seems like he's doing, and the brain can't stop him. But I think it says something that I have nothing to say about the scenes that took place before. They're basically all just establishing that he's been locked in there, he's slowly starving because there's no food, and the brain's trying to force him into the pod or die. But he can't let him go back and tell everyone else about what he's found. And that's kind of it, right? So, I mean, maybe there's some interesting stuff to come from this. Like, you know, if a bunch of these people do wake up and they were supposed to be spread out every 30 years, they're probably going to be very mad that they're all alive at the same time and try and reverse this, and maybe Norm will get into a fight or something. I don't know. Like, there's potential here for things collapsing, but as of yet, a lot of these scenes were kind of the same, which was just Norm is starving and he doesn't do something until the end of the episode. The ending, though, finally cuts to Hank, Lucy's father, who has got to, maybe he's in New Vegas, it's tough to tell exactly, but he's gotten to a Vault Tech building, some kind of headquarters, where there's no one there, but he finds himself a nice suit and tie, he gets himself cleaned up, he is looking at his work terminal and seeing that he's got hundreds of thousands of messages. But perhaps more interestingly, he sits down and tries to make contact with someone else. Now, my assumption is that this is Robert House that he is trying to contact, right? It's also worth mentioning, I'm realizing this as well. In the opening scene, Robert House was also in TV, and that wasn't Justin Theroux. But the way Justin Theroux acted felt like he was just that guy. And he's credited as Robert House, but so is the other guy that was on TV. So there was some wonkiness there about who Robert House is, I guess. But still, Justin Theroux's the bigger actor, and he gets such an introduction that I'm assuming he's the real Robert House, and the guy on TV was just the public facade. He's just the scapegoat. Or maybe there's multiples, maybe they're brothers, I don't know. But regardless, anyway, I just thought I'd mention that because I just remembered that in the moment. But anyway, I'm assuming that Hank's trying to call Robert House. But because he keeps saying sir and things like that, and he says, I hope you're still alive, I'm letting you know that I'm still alive, and I can finish off this research with these mind control chips, these brain altering chips. I believe I can get this done, and I will, you know, then we can talk about my promotion. So even in spite of everything else, he's still looking for a promotion, he's still a company man, and yeah, that's interesting. You know, I'm curious as to where we're going with that. You know, I think this location, him still being like who he was before all the stuff started, especially since the last episode of season 1 did confirm, no, he was in this company when he was younger, before everything happened. And he has been in cryosleep, and now he's awake, and he still has all the same ambitions he did before, regardless of connections to his daughter, regardless of connections to everyone else. In fact, the Eye Patch Lady feeling nothing for her baby maybe further just emphasizes this idea that he maybe doesn't actually care about Lucy all that much. You know, like the kids and this idea of like the lineage is kind of not what's important to them in a broad sense. So, well, we'll see. But yeah, I mean, it's probably the most interesting scene outside of the opening sequence. I didn't feel a whole lot for a lot of the episode, though. Everything looked great, and everything felt like it was still in that same world, but I wouldn't say anything meaningful really happened in terms of the actual story, in terms of actually advancing things and advancing the character relationships. It felt like it was an episode more about reminding us all where we were at the end of last season, and everyone's still kind of in that same place for the most part. and now we're kind of going forward. So my hope is that with next episode, we'll feel like things are moving ahead. Now, of course, we didn't even cut to Maximus this episode, and what's going on with the Brotherhood of Steel. I presume we're just saving that because they felt they wanted to devote all the time to these characters this episode. However, given that my critique is that I don't think that much actually happened, there probably was room to just do the first few scenes with the Brotherhood of Steel and Maximus anyway. Because I could have cut some scenes with Lucy and the Ghoul this episode. I could have really cut a lot of the flashbacks out, to be honest. I think that certainly the first few of them feel like they didn't really accomplish much. Because at least if him running away with his daughter in the flashbacks led to a fight with the wife, I would feel like there was consequences. And maybe if he really did commit and double down to this idea, I'm going to keep spying on him. I'm going to stay in the marriage and pretend that everything's okay so that I can spy and potentially do something about what my wife's up to. That could be something as well. But it didn't even feel like he made a definitive decision by the end of the episode. So I still feel kind of lukewarm and all of that. So I don't know, yeah, just okay. Like the world feels like it's the same world as season 1. It feels like the production design and all that is up to par with what it was. I don't think the story as of yet is really kicking off, but that could just be them thinking we have to ease everyone back into it and remind everyone where we were with all these characters. But I was feeling this episode drag a little bit, and I was feeling my attention waver a bit as it was going on, because it didn't feel like it was really pushing things forward in any particular of the plot lines, and we're just kind of hitting ideas by the end of the episode, as opposed to things feeling like they're evolving throughout. But I don't know. Let me know if you feel the same way in the comments. Let me know if you feel the same kind of just lackadaisical. I'm surprised as well, because the really good reviews for season 2 made me assume it was going to be a banger right out of the gate. Now, maybe the reviewers got the whole season. Maybe the reviewers got maybe at least a handful of episodes, so they know that we're building to some great stuff. But at least this first episode, I don't think was that well paced. And while I actually like that this is a weekly show this time, I prefer that. I think everything should be weekly. I do not like the binge format. I prefer that. Ironically, I think because it's weekly now, I think this episode is suffering. Maybe it would have been wise to put out the first 2 together, which I don't think they did, unless I've missed something. But I think this is suffering as a result, because it doesn't feel well paced. It doesn't feel like a full... I always talk about each episode should feel like a full meal. I should feel satisfied, like I got advancements, I've been left wanting more, and all the rest of it. This feels more like something from a binge model TV show where it's moving really slow with not a lot of push. So I'm hoping that'll change in episode 2, but I gotta say how it feels, and I don't think I feel that strongly on this first episode in a positive sense. I don't feel that negative either. If this pacing keeps up, they might turn more negative, but at least right now, we're waiting to see what comes next. So yeah, feel lukewarm. So let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via, of course, YouTube membership. Any support is greatly appreciated. Thanks to everyone who already does. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?